I think it's a great idea. The more exposure you can get to readership, especially starting out, the better. Podcast is a great way of doing that. Make sure you have a website. You know, if you can be blogging, like the more that you can get out there, get your name out there, the better it is. You know, the easier it is to be published. You know, Insomniac, we don't publish science fiction, but we do publish mystery, you know, it's really important. It's really important for the mystery writers to get out there and find their readerships. And it's a little easier, I think, in terms of those kinds of genres to make connections within the community. There's very strong mystery writer organizations and conventions and all sorts of things where they can start connecting with their peers and with their readerships. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think actually at Penguin they were developing podcasting as well for some of the children's books. I mean, my question would be, why wouldn't it be a great thing?
Because does it not prevent publishing to some editors to have your stuff out there?
Oh, absolutely not. Well, it's better if it is a little bit polished. But yeah.
But Sammy, if you're showing that you can get an audience, that you're developing a readership, then that makes you more valuable as a writer. And when you go to a publishing company, and you can say for any genre, you can say, I now have this many subscribers to my podcast, or you're showing it's sort of a validation from the field. So it's a good thing. Well, you just don't want to give it all away.
Yeah.
I think it's best to do, small pieces as opposed to here is my entire novel.
Well, that's an interesting debate on how much you give away. Hillary makes a good point about being able to go to a publisher you're trying to interest in your work and say, I've got 4,000 people who subscribe to my entire podcast, listen to every episode, and if that turns into 4,000 books, that's not bad in the Canadian market. The debate remains about how much to put out there. I put my entire novel up for free. Mind you, I didn't have a publisher at the time. But McClelland Stewart has not asked me to take it down, and in fact, I am podcasting the entire sequel, The High Road, the new novel coming out in September, in its entirety for free. So just like the last one, it'll be available for free. Now, the one concession to the commercial interest of publishing is that, as Hillary sort of alluded to, it won't be all available until after the book is on the shelves. But 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, the whole podcast will be finished then. So I do see some movement. It's the first time McClelland Stewart has ever done that, and do see some sort of enlightened movement in that area, recognizing that people listen to the podcast and enjoy it. The odds are, I think, that they're going to buy the book. And that's the gamble, but I think the evidence is starting to mount that principle will be honored. So.
I was going to ask you why you are doing it, so I guess that's the answer. That you really believe it will lead to more buyers.
Well, I do, and I also, in a way, I have the listeners to the podcast to thank, in a way, for being here, because as I mentioned in the session we just came from, it was the initial listeners to the podcast, however small those numbers might have been in the early going, that gave me the courage to go through the self-publishing process. I know, boo hiss, but and which eventually led to the publishing deal and a new career in a way for me. So I kind of feel I owe the social media community, my community, a chance to see the second book as well, and McClelland Stewart has agreed, thankfully. So.
Are you serializing it, or is it really all one?
No, I do one chapter a week.
Okay.
So.
Because I think that's a good blend. Because I think what could happen there is someone listens for 3 weeks and then they can't wait and they go buy the book.
Right.
But realistically, I think if someone listens to the whole thing, I wouldn't go buy the book. I'd say, oh, okay, I know what happened. I know how it ended, and now I'm going to go listen to something else.
Well, it depends. It's funny. I don't. you can understand that viewpoint, but if you really love the book, I want it.
Then
I
you
want to
still
hold
want
it in my
it, yeah.
hand. I want to hold it.
If you spend all that time listening
Yeah.
to them, it's like, you know, you're a fan, or you got to get something to do during the day. You know, it's like it's you know, way, so. I think the espresso machines is that I really don't know as a reader if they're that enticing, right? Is that when you go to what's that? Oh, it's basically it's a contraption that prints books that you put down in the middle of a bookstore so that you can select from millions of different titles. You just hit the button, you go have a coffee, come back, and your book is printed and you buy it.
But only a few bookstores have them.
That's right, yeah. Like
University bookstores.
McMaster has one, and that. There's a few more down in the States, but...
they're very, very expensive machines.
They are. They're very... It's like having a photocopier. You have the repair guy in every day, apparently. Anyways, the thing is that I think it's good for self-publishing in the sense that the books will be available in the bookstores. But as a reader, someone who goes to bookstores, what I enjoy is browsing. If I knew exactly the book I wanted, I'll order it online, right? Instead of taking the chance that some obscure title isn't in my local bookstore. But the reason you go to a bookstore is more about browsing. It's that finding those gems, finding those things, finding those authors that you didn't know about when you walked in the front door. You're not going to get that rolling down the screen on an espresso machine. In a lot of ways, I think that when you look at what the American Bookseller Association is doing and promoting this to a certain degree, is that bookstores are really worried about their survival, and particularly in competition to Amazon. And they feel that this gives them an opportunity to compete against the 2 million title inventory of Amazon. But it doesn't, that's not why people are going into the bookstores specifically. So I think that in a lot of ways, the espresso machine, it's not going to work, right? You already have Amazon there. And really, if you peel back the layers, you see it's Ingram book wholesalers that are promoting the espresso machine. They own it, and they're trying to compete against Amazon. This is just another battle in a very long war that they're waging with Amazon. So, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work.
I think it works. It's placed in the university bookstores because it's a value for the academic market, where there's a class that wants, there's 12 students in a particular specialty and they need a textbook and it's out of print, or they're not going to reprint it. So there's great value there. They can do sort of small runs. In a similar sort of vein, for a few of my authors who were published by traditional publishers, once the rights reverted, they wanted to get their books back out there again. And I've relicensed those books to sort of like a print-on-demand sort of system. And what works for them is that they are both books that fall into a certain category. One is parenting, one is health. So if you're, at home with a crisis at 2 a.m. you can find it on Amazon and say, I want that book, and order it, but then it actually then gets printed on demand and gets sent to you. And that works, but there's no flip side of it. There's no one actually marketing that book, promoting it, trying to sell it to the bookstore. It's just out there in the ether.
No one's stocking it.
Yeah, no one's stocking it, but it exists. And that's the same thing for the espresso, is that if a reader can find it, then you can hit the button and get it.